All right, we're going to dive right in. People can keep joining us as they get here. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon to check out our webinar today. We're here to talk about our new on-demand teacher support library and how those resources can support you or the teachers that you work with. My name is Renee Affelter, and I'm here with my colleagues Christy Lathrop and Matt Crable. And we're going to show you around this library and help you see what's there. And you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions, et cetera, along the way. So here's our plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why and the what of the library. I'll give you a general tour, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time actually digging into some of the resources to see how they can actually help us answer some of our common questions. You'll get a chance to explore a little bit yourself, and then we'll close it up and give you an opportunity also to suggest new resources because the library is growing all the time. So before we dig into the what and the why, to get us started, I want you to just take a couple minutes on a scrap piece of paper and jot down some questions or things you would like support with in teaching OpenSciEd. And then when you're ready, in the chat, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, say who you are, maybe something about your experience with OpenSciEd, doesn't have to be long, but maybe you're new to it. Maybe you've taught a few units, maybe you've taught lots of units, or supported teachers in that way. And share one question or something you would like support with. So let's get to know a little bit about who's in the room. Take a minute and add that to the chat, please. Thanks, Jean. Yeah, sometimes it's like, I don't even know what questions I have. Hopefully we'll have some answers or support for you. Lots of instructional coaches, great. These are perfect resources to bring back to support the teachers that you're working with. Any resources and support? Well, you are in the right place, Gabriella. Great. We've seen some supports on assessments. Why isn't there a teacher answer book? Okay. All right. You can keep adding to the chat as we go. But these questions and these ideas, especially like folks that are new to OpenSciEd don't have a lot of support or haven't had a lot of professional learning, excuse me, is why we are designing this OpenSciEd support library in the first place. So we know that OpenSciEd's mission is to create classrooms with inspired educators and motivated learners. And we do that by designing free, high quality NGSS aligned materials and by supporting teachers in using them well. And we've always sort of from the very beginning said professional learning has to be part of that vision, right? Teachers deserve the support to implement these materials in ways that make them feel powerful and sustainable. But we also know that we have a lot of professional learning. So, for example, we have launch and unit deep dive workshops, we have on-site and virtual offerings. There's a whole network of certified professional learning providers. We've got webinars and other tools. We have Facebook groups. So there's a lot of supports out there, but we know that not everybody can access it, right? You can't always attend a professional learning workshop, or even if you do, once you actually start teaching the unit is when you have questions that come up, and that's when you need the support. So that's why we built this library to remove barriers, right? To extend that support beyond a workshop and to provide some quick, clear, helpful answers so that to the questions that teachers are actually asking. So what do we mean when we say on-demand teacher resource library? This is the go-to space for short videos and planning tools and just-in-time help. And we designed it with these principles and priorities in mind. So we want them to be relevant and practical, flexible, accessible, and quick. Use it in the time that we have. So let's look at those a little bit more closely before we take a little tour of the library. So first, these things are meant to be relevant and focused on what matters most to teachers using OpenSciEd. Like, how do I support student thinking in a sense-making discussion? Or like, how do I make a driving question board work with, I have 5 sections, right? And we drew on a bunch of data to support us in identifying like what are the priorities for teachers. So things like we surveyed thousands of teachers. We pulled from all of the professional learning workshops we do and the leaders that we work with. And we looked at the Facebook groups, among other things, to make sure that what we're designing is relevant and actually addressing real teacher needs. We also wanted to make sure that these were practical, right? That these were concrete help that teachers can use immediately, that both make teachers think, but also make teaching easier. So it might be a checklist, it might be a video that models a practice, it might be a planning guide. And we didn't want that practicality to just be about what to do, but really it's about showing how real teachers are doing it. So it's built on and featuring real teacher voices. So teachers are sharing their strategies. You're going to see videos of teachers in action. And these are like honest, useful sort of takes on how they're making this work that maybe you can see yourself in and be able to adapt to your own setting. We also wanted to make sure that they were flexible, right? We want them to fit different needs, roles, and settings. So whether you are using them solo and you're just trying to figure something out, there's a lot of people here who are instructional coaches or who are working with other teachers. Maybe you're just getting ready to prep. Maybe you're going to lead some PD. Maybe you just need a quick refresher, but we wanted it to be able to fit a bunch of different needs and roles and settings and that they can support teachers at every stage of OpenSciEd. So what's interesting is that when I'm looking in the chat, there are folks that are brand new and they're just trying to start out teaching one unit, and then there are folks that have been here for a long time. And so we wanted to make sure that we have resources that could help you get started with your very first driving question board, all the way to I've been teaching this for a while and I'm struggling with supporting my kids with modeling. We also wanted to make sure that the library was accessible. And we mean that it's built for every teacher. So regardless of your tech setup or your background or your experience with OpenSciEd, there's no logins, no apps, no hoops, just click and get into the resources that you need when you need them. And it's not just about being easy to access, it's also easy to understand and use, right? So the resources are meant to be self-contained and intuitive, which means you don't need to attend a workshop or first or have someone walk you through it. They're designed to stand on their own and be immediately usable. And then finally, quick. We know time is a huge barrier. That's a big barrier in helping get teachers the support that they need. That's why we're trying to create these resources that can fit into the small windows teachers actually have. So during prep, between classes, maybe waiting for a meeting to start. And so there are things like a 3-minute video instead of a 20, or a tool that doesn't take an hour of prep to understand. So the focus is on getting in there and being able to use it right away. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. Before I pop us over to the website, I just want to orient you a tiny bit to it, which is the support library is organized into 6 topic areas. So you'll see the ones that are organized, that are outlined in orange. These are our topic videos and resources, and those are organized around the most common questions asked. So teaching with storylines, daily teaching moves, assessment, differentiation, and planning and prep. And we'll look a little bit more closely at those in just a minute. And then there's a section around unit specific resources. So focused on, I'm going to go teach 8.1 and I need support with that. Across the library, though, you're going to see a common theme of resources. First, we've got topic videos. And so these are short, focused videos where you'll hear from a range of voices. So there's teachers and leaders and researchers and OpenSciEd facilitators sharing ideas and strategies and practical tips. And again, they're focusing on those common questions and instructional moves that are going to help me be able to address the challenge I'm having right then or for the next day. We also have these classroom spotlights. These are my favorite. These take you inside real classrooms using OpenSciEd. So you're going to see teachers showing how they set up their space or how they use notebooks with students or some of the key routines like the driving question board. And they're not polished demos, right? They're real classrooms grounded in the reality of teaching that can give you a little window into what OpenSciEd can look like in action and offer ideas that you can adapt to your own context. We also have teacher moves. These are short, actionable strategies that focus on the little things that can make a big difference. So they might be specific things you can say or do to support sense making. And you're going to find teacher moves on things like how to use related phenomena or what to do with all your posters or maybe some talk moves. So they're designed to be like quick to read, easy to try, and directly tied to moments in the lesson that matter that you need help with. And then finally, there will be some longer pieces, articles. So they're either articles or they're tools, like the discussion planning tool or an assessment tool. So they're great for planning, reflection, or team learning. I'm going to take a second, just check the chat and make sure there's nothing that I need to be attending to. My assistants, Matt and Christy, are on it, but just holler if there's anything I need to do. Okay. All right, great. So let's go check it out for ourselves. Um, I'm going to take us over to the library and I'm going to show you there are several ways that you can access the on-demand library. The easiest way for me is I go to professional learning and then I scroll down and I see on-demand teacher support library. So when I click on that, there are my 6 tiles that should look familiar. And so let me walk through a little bit about how to sort of navigate this and what's in each of these tiles. We will dig deeper into each of these as well. So the first is the teaching with storylines. And this section helps you understand how OpenSciEd units are designed so that students stay engaged and how you can help them build ideas over time. Then we have this section called daily teaching moves, and that has strategies for things like leading discussions or supporting student thinking, building your classroom culture. That's what's going to be in daily teaching moves. Assessment, everyone's favorite topic, helps you understand what to assess, how to do it formatively and summatively, and how to support learning, not just grading. Then we have a section on differentiation. And you're going to find ways to support all learners. So using accessibility strategies and language supports and smart adaptations. There's a section here called planning and preparation. And this one's perfect for when you're gearing up to teach. So maybe you're organizing your materials, or maybe you're pacing out your week, or maybe setting up your classroom space, or maybe you're just trying to navigate what's there. This planning and preparation section can really help you. And then finally, we have these unit specific resources. And you'll see that when you hover over, you can see elementary, middle, and high school. So there are unit specific resources for every single grade level we have. Let's pop into a middle school one. And you'll see that they're organized by grade level. And then if I go into one, you're going to see by unit. So I've got unit 6.1 here. First up are these lesson level resources. And these are short planning videos that are created by teachers who've taught the units multiple times, who are sharing, giving big overviews, and sharing some specific tips and strategies and techniques to help that lesson go well. And we're going to check one of those out later, but you can see that there are going to be these lesson planning videos for all of the lessons within a unit. We also have unit level resources like the webinar, our quick start guide, which is like if you're just starting to a new unit and you need a little overview about what's going on. We have for the point 1 units, these absent student support videos. We also have grading planning tools for all of the units and a direct link to the Facebook groups for that unit, which are a great place to get resources. So we'll go into these a little bit more, and we'll actually check out one of those videos. But let's go back to the main library and see if we can see those resources again that we mentioned were in every single part of our library. So I'm going to go on to daily teaching moves. And one thing I want to notice first is that up here at the top, I can always navigate to a new topic up here. I can also search my on-demand library. And then on the side, you're going to see these subtopics. So this one for daily teaching moves right now has discussions, classroom culture, science practices and skills, student engagement, and absent students. And if I click on any of these, it drops me down to that section and I can check out what resources are there. Let's go back up to the discussions though. And you'll see that there are several rows of resources that are organized by the topic. So for example, we have getting started with discussions. And there you'll see that we have these topic videos. So this one is why student talk matters in OpenSciEd. So if I click on that, I'm always going to see a short description, how long the video is, then I can play the video directly right here. And then at the bottom, there's going to be some related content that I might want to go to next. And then I can always navigate back by going back with the back button, or I can go back over here to my on-demand topics. So I'm just going to go back. So that's the topic videos. I mentioned that we have these classroom spotlights. So here's a classroom spotlight where a teacher is showing how she sets up scientist circles in her awkwardly shaped room, how she gets them going around the desks, and what that looks like, um, as well as a teacher move. So if I click on a teacher move, this one's about tips for making scientist circles work, and you'll see there's short strategic tips, and you could always download that teacher move if you wanted to print it out and have it on your desk available. And then finally, I mentioned that there are articles. Sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're a tool. In this case, on this page that I'm on, there happens to be the discussion planning tool. And you'll notice that it has a description of it. It has a hyperlink here to the Google Doc, or I could click on it and download the tool. And so this is the revised discussion planning tool. So again, this sort of pattern of the types of resources is true no matter where in the library you are. There's those topic videos, classroom spotlights, teacher moves, and articles. So let's see. Now that we've sort of have a tour, let's dig in a little bit and think about how the library can help us with some common questions. And they might even be some of the common questions that you mentioned in the chat when we first started. So here's a first one. Got one recently from a Facebook group. A teacher said, I'm new to OpenSciEd and would like to know how to navigate the resources on here. They look great, just a lot. It would help to get an understanding of how things are organized. So now's your chance to think a little bit. Where could that person go for resources? And you can add your ideas in chat. Which of these topic areas would you suggest they go to get them help with finding the resources or navigating the resources? Some seeing some unit specific resources, a suggestion. I'm seeing some plan and prep. What are other ideas? Unit specific resources tile. Oh, I like this abbreviation already, Alan. Nice. Any other suggestions? Unit specific. So a lot of suggestions for unit specific, and the unit specific will help us be able to, for a specific unit, figure out how to teach a particular lesson or maybe have a unit overview. If I just want to even know, like, what is in a teacher guide or what's in a folder when I open it up, or how do I find the materials? One of the best places to go would be planning and preparation. So let's go take a look at one of those. If I go to planning and preparation, I'm going to see there's a section about accessing the materials. And so first there's how do I even access them? What are the 4 different ways I can do that? What version should I use? How do I use the Google Classroom Uploader? Then there are some unit and lesson planning tools. So there's a video about planning in general. There's a video about unit selection, a tour of the unit level resources. So again, this person was like, I don't know how to find stuff. Can you help me out? If I click over a little bit further, there's a tour of the OpenSciEd lesson level resources. And so let's pop into one of those and see if that would help this person with being able to navigate the resources. So I'm going to go ahead and play the first few minutes of this just so we can kind of get a sense of how this resource could help us.
Every OpenSciEd lesson is built with a full set of resources to support you and your students. In this video, we'll explore what's included in each lesson's folder, take a detailed look at the lesson teacher edition, and show how linked tools like simulations and videos extend the learning experience. Each lesson folder includes everything you need for instruction: teacher planning tools, editable slides, handouts, references, assessments, rubrics, all in Google format for easy access and customization. When you open a folder, a lesson level folder, you'll see a lot of items. I'm going to help you understand the pattern of how these items show up so that you can easily make sense and navigate all lesson folders. So at the very top, you'll find handouts, both in English and Spanish, and assessments. So the top part of the folder is always going to be the handouts and assessment in Spanish, handout and assessment in English. After that, you'll see the slides. We have them translated into Spanish at the high school level, and in the middle school level, you'll see just the English slides. We then have lesson level student procedures, both in Spanish and English. The teacher edition for the lesson, which is a very important document that we're going to unpack later in this video, and then teacher references and keys. Now, depending on the lesson, there may be a lot of handouts or a few handouts. There may be additional slide decks or forms, but this is the same pattern that you'll find lesson to lesson. And so once you understand how to navigate it, it makes it easier to make sense of the big folder of items. All of these materials are designed to work together to support student sense making and make your instructional planning easier. So we're going to dive into that lesson level teacher edition. There are 5 key sections: the lesson overview, the learning plan snapshot, materials and preparation, where we're going, not going, and then the learning plan, which is the bulk of the document. So first, the first section is the unit or the lesson overview, and it gives you the big picture, where the lesson fits into the unit, what students will figure out, and how it builds towards the NGSS aligned outcomes. You'll see at the top, we have the lesson question, then some information about the routine and length, how the lesson fits in the storyline, and then at the bottom, we have information about both the NGSS performance expectations, the 3D lesson level performance expectations, and then what students are going to figure out during the lesson. So a big overview, big picture idea of what's happening in this lesson. The next section is the learning plan snapshot. This breaks down the lesson into parts with timing, slides, materials, and a brief description of each step. This is perfect for getting oriented at a glance. When you're thinking about planning out your lesson, it also is really helpful to think about those day breaks that are really natural and kind of scheduled in.
All right, I'm going to pause us there and have us check out another issue or common question that comes out to see what kind of resources might be there to support it. So the next one we heard from the field, but this one was about notebooks. It says, our district just decided to use OpenSciEd this year, so I'm looking for advice for notebooks. What's worked for you? This will be my first year teaching OpenSciEd. So this again was on the Facebook groups. And you might say, well, I don't know exactly where that would be, but I can go to my search bar up here, search on-demand library, and I can search notebooks. And I say, oh, wow, there's a bunch of resources around notebooks. And what I'm noticing is there are 3 classroom spotlights. That means 3 different teachers sharing with us how they use notebooks. One of them uses binders, 2 of them use composition notebooks, because there's not one right way of doing it, right? We want to be able to show lots of different ways that you can sort of see yourself in and then adapt as needed. There's a webinar. There's also a video about getting started with notebooks. So that would be strategies across classrooms. And then finally, there's one about practical strategies about grading notebooks. But let's pop into one of these classroom spotlights and check out a little bit about what that might look like.
I am Gretchen Brunza, and I'm a middle school science teacher. I teach 6th and 7th grade science. I think there is so much power in actually just maintaining a notebook with students. For students to write their ideas down, to give them a space to draw their ideas, a space to organize their thoughts is just so critical. I start the year with each kid, like when they get a notebook and a Sharpie, it's like, hey, you're in period 4, you're in 6th grade, and you have me as your teacher, and then they put their name on it, okay? I usually keep a binder clip at the front because the binder clip at the front is anything that I pass back or like a data sheet that we use that day and it's attached, okay? You maybe have seen things regarding norms, so every kid gets a copy of that. So when we set up our notebook, you'll notice I have a document camera here. It's like my lifeline. I feel that as a middle school teacher, I'm still teaching organization. And so you can see here that everything I expect students to do, I'm doing too. And so I typically have in the beginning of a unit after we launch, there's a model reference page. And so we start with our initial diagram in the back, and every time we have a model, I add it to the front. So this is our progression of thinking over time. So you can see the complexity of that change, okay? So again, I model everything with students, okay? And you could see this over and over. I teach kids how to flap a page or how to keep it flat.
Say more about that.
Sure. So in this case here, you'll see a two difference here. So I like to also save pages. So in this case here, we took some notes. I didn't want to like waste a whole other page here. So the next day, whatever we got as some additional practice, it was flapped over this so they could pull it out. In this case here, this was super important. This got glued flat down. So if you look over here, I have these two handouts that it's like, hey, when you glue something flat in your notebook, you do a box and an X. And I actually move my marker. So I will tell kids, okay, I'm giving something back. The board says flat, get it in flat. And then I tell kids when you glue it in as a flap, it's only one strip of glue and it's over something. And then I just move my magnets over accordingly so they know how to get it into their notebook.
How do you copy things so that they fit into the notebook?
Sure. So here, I'll give you 2 frames of reference. I'm trying to think of a good example. All right, so this is a perfect example for you to see. So our initial model from our math bomb unit. This, my colleague and I decided that the model that was on a full page, we were able to print 2 per page, and this fit. Because we knew that was going to be the first model, it didn't need to take up the whole page. The next model that we did, this was printed full to begin with, and then I reduced it to 85%. Because I felt that if we did 2 per page, these 2 zoom-ins, or these 4 zoom-ins would be too small. So this page right here is at 85% copied. And then we want to save colored ink, okay? And so we took the class consensus model from our picture on one slideshow and we printed 4 per page. And that's what we slice under a paper cutter.
Hey, there's more to watch there if you're interested in hearing more, or you could check out some of the other classroom spotlights. So Melissa uses binders. Kathleen also uses composition notebooks, but she approaches it slightly differently. So you can check out the other resources that are there that might be helpful. Let's keep going. Let's see what else we got. Okay, discussions are challenging in my classroom. Some kids talk all the time and others won't talk at all. Help. All right, this is your chance again. Where should we go for resources? Hopefully you didn't see that. Go ahead and use the chat. What section should they go to, do you think, for help with this discussions situation? Seeing daily teaching moves, maybe something about differentiation, right? There definitely could be like crossover there. And resources can live in more than one place. We want to make sure that this is like usable and that you can actually find what you need. Right now, where discussions lives is under daily teaching moves. So let's go take a look. And this teacher was talking about that they've been teaching it and they're struggling with getting kids talking. And so we worked with a teacher, Sam Stickley, who came up with a strategy to try to help her students set goals for talk because she was struggling with the same thing. So let's go check that one out. This one's called Strengthening Talk with Individual Goals. And we're going to hear how she uses this strategy.
It was the middle of the year. My classroom was painfully quiet. I'd ask students to share ideas and get crickets. I reminded them of our norms. I gave them wait time. I even modeled responses. Still, nothing. That same week, a researcher was in my classroom recording everything I did. Each afternoon, I had to sit down and watch myself teach. It was eye-opening. As I watched, I started noticing patterns. Some kids were dominating the discussions, and others weren't talking at all. And everyone else fell somewhere in between. I found myself wishing I could give each student just one piece of advice, something personalized they could use right away. But how could I do that quickly for every student without taking up all our class time? So I came up with something that ended up working pretty well. A simple visual that students could use to figure out a goal that really made sense for them. Each student started at the top of the decision tree with the question, "Do you talk in class?" From there, they followed a path of yes/no questions. For example, do you talk in class? If they say no, then the questions began to focus on why the students may not be participating. For example, the next question on the decision tree is, do you not talk because you're not paying attention? If their answer is yes, then the flowchart suggests the goal for them to use. In this case, it says, ask questions to teacher or group members when you get lost. Once they land on a goal, they wrote it in a designated spot in their science notebook. We all use the same page, so it was easy to find. That became their focus for their week. Each day, we'd take a minute at the start of class for students to reread those goals and share their individual goals with their shoulder partner. The point of this was to keep each other accountable and to encourage each other. At the end of class, students would get feedback from their shoulder partners as to whether they met their goal. They used agreed upon symbols, like an X or a check, to show if they met their goal or not in a simple chart, which was checked daily by me as an exit ticket. At the beginning of each new week, we'd pause to reflect more deeply by using the flowchart again. Sometimes they would pick a new goal, and sometimes they would keep the same goal. One thing I figured out pretty quickly: students don't get very far with reflection when they're working completely alone. The decision tree might look like an individual tool, but honest reflection doesn't happen in a vacuum. That's where shoulder partners came in. Instead of asking themselves, do you talk in class? The partner would ask the questions and, more importantly, help honestly rate themselves. So, if a quieter student said, yeah, I raise my hand all the time, their partner might need to tell them, actually, you don't. That feedback, truthful, respectful, but real, was a big part of this process, and it didn't stop at the start of class. At the end of each period, partners also checked in. Did we follow through on our goals today? Did our behaviors match what we said we'd work on? That layer of accountability made goals stick. I also had to think about what it meant when students stuck with the same goal for weeks. Sometimes that's okay, especially for students who are perfectionists. For them, 4 out of 5 days isn't good enough. And if they're making real progress and choosing to keep going, I really want to honor that. But if a student has the same goal for 5 weeks and nothing's changing, that's a signal for me as the teacher that I need to step in. I need to pull them aside and ask them questions such as, what's getting in the way? Or, are you really working on this? And even more important, how can I support you to move forward? These small moves, partner feedback, daily check-ins, teacher follow-up, help turn this from a one-time activity into a routine that actually supported growth. After a while, I noticed students' progress on their individual goals started to level off. And you may notice this as well. Something I did to make progress on our goals again was to move to whole class goals. And you can check out our other videos in this section on how to set whole class goals. But this one little tool, our Do You Talk tree, changed the tone of our classroom talk. If you're looking for a place to start, or maybe you're feeling a little stuck, give it a try.
We're so appreciative of teachers for sharing these brilliant strategies that have worked for them. That tool you can find too right here. So if you click on this, it gives a description of it. It has the image of what she actually used in her classroom. It has a more, maybe perhaps readable version of it that you can then download. So if this is something that you want to try out in your own classroom, you can check it out. All right, we have time for a couple more. Let's see where we are. Assessment, right? This is great, but how do you assess students in OpenSciEd? And so you guessed it, we're going to go to the assessment section to find stuff about assessment. So let's go take a look. So you'll notice for the assessment section, there are subtopics. So the what and why of assessment, which includes some big picture overviews, day-to-day assessment, summative assessment, and of course, grading. And these, we're slowly adding more and more resources about grading because it's such a needed topic, because everyone has their own constraints and context that they need to adjust for. So let's just zoom into one that is sort of addressing this question of like, where are all the assessments? If you're digging into an OpenSciEd unit and asking, where are the assessments? That's a great question. They're there, but they're just built differently. Because when students are figuring out phenomena, revising their thinking, and collaborating to make sense of the world, assessment has to shift to match that kind of learning. Because the truth is, assessments communicate what we value. If our classrooms are now focused on figuring out phenomena, risk taking, revising ideas, and working together, then assessments must recognize and encourage that. Otherwise, we risk telling students that the work we value most isn't what counts. It's kind of like this. Imagine spending weeks teaching students how to build and revise scientific models to explain real-world phenomena, encouraging them to ask questions, test ideas, and rethink their models as they go. But then when it's time for assessment, and we just hand them a vocabulary quiz or a list of disconnected facts to memorize, what's the message we're sending to kids? The message we are sending is this. We didn't really care about all that sense making. We just care about getting the right answer. On the other hand, if our instruction values figuring out phenomena, using science practices, taking risks, and revising our thinking, then our assessments have to value those things too. That's why OpenSciEd designs assessments differently. Instead of a single shot to get it right, students have multiple opportunities to revise their ideas. Instead of defining words out of context, students apply their thinking to explain new phenomena. The assessments match the kind of learning we want students to carry with them long after the unit ends. OpenSciEd has embedded assessment moments called out in each lesson, times when students are making their thinking visible through activities like revising models, annotating graphs, or collaborating in a scientist circle. These aren't side activities, they are assessment moments, even if students don't feel like they're being assessed. For example, in the McKenna unit, students annotate graphs about food molecules moving through the body. As they write what it means statements, they're revealing their understanding. So you can use that information right away to give feedback, adjust instruction, or just spot patterns across the class. But embedded moments aren't the only assessments. At key points, students are asked to transfer what they figured out to new situations. These transfer tasks aren't about memorization. They're about applying science ideas and practices flexibly. Therefore, students deepen their understanding while you gather powerful evidence of what they know and can do. In OpenSciEd, assessment isn't an event, it's a process. It's a way to support students as they grow ideas over time, not a single moment to label them. Therefore, every conversation, model revision, investigation, and transfer task becomes an opportunity to see and support learning. And these are all built into OpenSciEd's assessment system. The system includes assessment with many different purposes, including pre-assessment, self-assessment, peer assessment, formative, and summative assessment. So if you're asking, where are the assessments? The answer is they're everywhere. They're designed to reflect the rich, authentic learning that students are doing every day. You're not just checking what students know, you're helping them build it. So check out our next videos for exactly how to use these assessments day to day. Okay, so that one is a little bit more of a big picture and sort of some where to find them. But when you go to our assessment page, you'll notice that the next section is about finding and using the assessment support built into every lesson. There are specific examples of how teachers are taking that assessment guidance and doing individual checks for when they need to get individual information about students. There's information about how to support those transfer tasks. And then there's stuff about grading. And I'll just highlight a couple things here. There are some ideas here about like what are our grades really communicating? And then there are different teachers sharing their grading approach when they're using OpenSciEd, as well as some specific ways that they're thinking about grading things like participation or summative assessments or notebooks. And then finally down here, there's a whole series of resources around planning for grading. So there's the grading planning tool itself. There's an overview video how to use that. When you go to the grading planning tool, you'll see a folder, and in that folder, there are high school planning tools and examples from every unit as well as for middle school. So those tools are there to help you figure out how to address grading yourselves. Okay, we're running, the time is flying by here. We're going to skip this one and we're going to go straight to the unit prep one because this is one that was brought up earlier, that might help someone with like, where do I find the resources? And it's also might help the group that is saying, we're prepping for 7th and 8th grade. We need some help here on how to prep for these lessons. So let's go take a look at the unit specific resources. Before we go there though, I do want to just highlight like what is in these prep videos. First of all, they're made by teachers who've taught the units multiple times. So they're giving you their real experiences and tips. It starts with how we got here, which is just a recap of what students figure out in the previous lessons and shows how we set up for today's lesson question. So it's given us just enough background to be like, okay, I know where we are. Then the next part is the lesson at a glance. And this gives a big picture overview of the lesson. So it's broken down into a few big sections or chunks. And then it will mark moments that we're going to go more deeply into in the key moments section. So this is the heart of the video, and it highlights the most important or potentially tricky parts of the lesson, the places where like that student sense making is really important. And the teachers are offering insights and examples or strategies to help with those key moments. And then finally, there's a section on material management tips and tricks. And so they're talking about managing materials and setup and which posters you need for this lesson. Are you going to need it for the next lesson? How to add things to your word wall. So the idea here is that it's just another way to plan. You have another teacher there with you as you sort of plan for this lesson. So let's take a look at one of these. I'm going to go over to the unit specific middle school. We're adding more and more of these every single day. We had a lot of teachers working on them this summer when they had a little bit more time. And so now those are starting to be added. And I'm going to go to Unit 6.3 and take a look at the weather unit, lesson 7. And so I will show parts of it and then I'll sort of fast forward a little bit just so you can get a sense of like what's in here so that you know how it might be useful for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Pisanik. I'm an OpenSciEd teacher in New Jersey, and I'm excited to talk with you about lesson 7, the humidity investigation lesson. My students love this particular lesson because they have a chance to plan and carry out an investigation, and then we have some great conversations about the results. So let's jump in and take a look at it. First, let's consider how we got here. We figured out a lot in lesson 6 about the movement of air on sunny days, and we also figured out that air, which we've been representing in our models up to this point as all one type of particle, is actually a mixture of different types of substances, including water vapor. And this last piece, the fact that air contains water vapor, leads us to our lesson 7 question. Where did all that water in the air come from, and how did it get into the air? So lesson 7 is a 2-day lesson, and students will plan and conduct an investigation on day 1. The lesson 7 investigation setup video is really helpful as you're prepping your bottle systems, and you'll want to budget time in advance to gather those materials and create the bottle systems. This is definitely a day before, not morning of prep, and it takes a bit of time the first time. But then you'll reuse the bottles in lesson 8, and you'll have them ready to go for every year after. Here's the lesson snapshot for our 2 days of lesson 7. I find it really helpful to think of this lesson in 2 main sense-making chunks that help us address the 2 parts of the question. Where did the water in the air come from, and how did it get into the air? There's several key moments that we'll look at more closely, but first let's zoom into that first sense-making chunk. So here's a closer look at day 1 and the start of day 2. Students recall what they figure out about what air is made of and what humidity is, and then they explore the humidity levels in our classroom using a humidity probe. This helps us to make predictions, plan an investigation, and then we'll carry out that investigation. And at the start of day 2, spend some time interpreting the data. All of these activities help us to gather evidence and to figure out that water can go into the air from many different types of surfaces with water in or on them. For the remainder of day 2, we work to explain how this is happening. How are those water molecules?
I'm going to fast forward us a little bit to the key moments so you can see that section where she's going to highlight specific moments in the unit.
But our goal today is to really understand lesson 7. So let's take a look at some of the key moments. A first key moment comes near the start of day 1, after we quickly think back to what we have figured out about what air is made of and what humidity is. We use a humidity probe to measure the amount of water vapor in the air of our classroom. And also near a source of boiling water, an electric kettle works really well for that. And then also near a window. And then we compare those. I'll be honest, the first time I taught this, I skipped the mini activity and I just showed the kids a humidity probe and moved into the investigation. But taking the few minutes to make predictions and test different areas of our classroom really helps motivate the need for our investigation. So it's time well spent. The students see that humidity varies and that we can put more water vapor into the air. But water vapor isn't boiling outside. And we know there's water in the air. So where is that water coming from?
I'm going to skip us ahead to material.
So here's a few tips to help manage the planning and conducting investigation pieces of this lesson. Definitely helpful, as we said earlier, to watch the lesson 7 investigation setup video in advance. Don't forget to check the batteries in your humidity probes and test them before you do this with kids. The setup video shows Velcro to attach the humidity probe to the bottle, and that's ideal, but tape will also work. And when you're gathering earth materials to use what you have. If it's snowing outside and you have snow, great, but if not, crushed ice works. The 6.3 Facebook group also has a lot of great tips around this investigation. And then we also create a consensus model at the end of day 2. And that's a consensus model that's helpful to save for future lessons. So taking a photo or saving that poster that you could come back to, it's a resource the kids can look back to. I hope some of these tips and tricks help you in your...
Okay, you get the idea here. So really practical advice from teachers who have taught these units before. That can really help you when you're planning. You could imagine listening to it. You could imagine planning for the next couple weeks and sort of watching a couple of those. And I'm seeing some questions come up. We are going to be, the goal is to create these for all of the units. And we've started on high school. We should by September 1st, we should have almost all of the point 1, point 2, and point 3 units for middle school up. So they're coming. All the point 1s are up right now, though. So if you're teaching the point 1 units, all of those resources are there. So, all right, we've covered a lot. You all are very patient. And now we have just a couple minutes to do your turn. So what I'd like you to do is to navigate over to the on-demand library yourself. Christy just threw it in the chat as well. And poke around. What is an activity or what is a resource that you would want to share with a colleague? Okay. And be thinking about what that is. And after you've had a few minutes to search, we're going to ask you to share that in the chat with why you would share that particular resource. But let's take a couple quiet minutes and see what you can find. Everybody have one they want to share that we haven't seen yet? Oh, Sue found one about initial consensus models, which can be tricky, especially the first time through. Oh, Brittany found one in our differentiation section, how to support vocab building without killing the sense making. And you'll notice that there's a lot more coming in that differentiation section. That was one that we worked on a lot this summer, but they're just not live yet. Awesome. Alan checked out the absent student videos for 6-1, might be able to use with her students. So we really encourage you to share these widely. We want teachers to know that they're available. and that they're there to help them and that we're adding more all the time. So one thing that we suggest is that this demand library is meant to be shared. So if you feel comfortable sharing it on your socials or sharing it with your groups or responding to people's questions, please do. The more we can get it out there, the more helpful it's going to be for teachers. It's also great to be able to use it with colleagues. So use it during department or PLC time, create a study group with friends, digging into assessment resources or any other PLC topics. And we will be over time too, as we develop these resources, offering playlists and suggestions for ways that you could use these resources with colleagues. And that's not it. We're constantly updating our resources. So we're just getting started. I added a bunch more resources today. So more and more are coming and are in the works. But we would love to hear from you. What resources would you like us to create? And so you'll see a link to a survey where whenever you think of something that you want us to create, add it in there. And we'll take a look and we'll try our best to make something that would be supportive of you. And if you have something that you want to contribute, we're constantly trying to get new teacher voices in to share these resources. So the other thing that you can do is make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So then every time we add a new resource, you're alerted and you know that there's some new stuff out there. So we are around for questions and answers. Um, but we appreciate your time today and we hope that you spread the word widely about this library. Thanks, everyone. Brittany, we have a series about absent students. There's one up now, and then there are many more coming, including specific strategies that teachers try, as well as some additional higher sort of things to consider. Janet, did you have a question? I think maybe you're having some audio problems. We can't hear you. No, sorry. Can you type it? Oh, yes. So Sarah put a suggestion like start at the top and see how far you get. That's one approach because it's new to you and it's new to your students. So get in there and start to see what it feels like to go through those units. And then there are some recommendations in the teacher guide and the unit overview materials about how to condense units. Rosemary, you had a question? Maybe not.
Sorry about that. I am going to be teaching ninth grade environmental science, which is something that the state that I work in, Pennsylvania, has decided that every high school student must have. I'm wondering if you're going to be developing any plans or any units for environmental science.
In terms of for the high school units, you're talking specifically for high school?
Yes, or I mean, these are freshmen that I'm going to be teaching. So not quite sure where they are on the spectrum. as far as, who is at grade level, who's below grade level. So I would take anything from middle school to high school.
So I don't know exactly what the environmental standards are, how they align with the NGSS standards for Pennsylvania, but my guess is that many of those standards are already incorporated into the high school units. Um, but we would have to send that question to someone who has more experience with the high school units. Um, I don't know if Christy or Matt have anything to add to that one for Pennsylvania.
They're
I'd
they're
say
actually
there's quite a bit of overlap between the and there are some documents out there, and we can see if we can find them that talk about the overlap between the next generation science standards and the SEALs, including the additional standards that are addressing the environment. So I think that one of the ways that you could think about that would be to look at the NGSS standards that are being addressed in the unit and do a cross reference to the seals. We don't currently have that as a thing to share, but I know people have done it, and a lot of the IUs in Pennsylvania have access to those documents. So if you reach out to your local intermediate unit, they may be able to help you and find those cross reference documents.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. We're going to close out and we'll see you at the next webinar.